So in our previous session, we had gone through like the TDS, how we can access the test data repository from our Tosca, and yeah, how we can do the changes, read the data, write something to that TDS. The next thing that I want to uh, explain is about recovery scenarios. So if I have to explain about recovery scenarios, let me just create a folder. So recovery scenarios. What basically a recovery scenario is, let's say we have our application demo web shop, and then our scenario is as the flow, as the test case says, okay, navigate to this application and then click on login. And as soon as you click on login button, you would uh, get this email, username, password, email, password, and then to click on login. But sometimes, let's say, when you have navigated on a page, you might get some unexpected pop-up, right? As soon as you click on login, something appears on the screen, which is what unexpected, and it is also like it's not every time you would get the same thing. So uh, to overcome such situations wherein you would not expect, you haven't expected something which regularly we get, or it regularly behaves in that way, our application, but something unexpected things comes up. So to handle those kind of situations, we use this recovery scenarios. Yes, there is other way wherein we can what use conditions saying if some pop-up appears, then click on it. But then when you are
Pradeep,
using,
in general
yeah,
scenario, it is called as error handling or something like that. When
error handling, yes, you can say it. uh, uh, yeah, recovering from that situation. So yeah, you can say that error handling thing as well.
Okay.
So uh, so as I was saying, if some unexpected thing comes up, not only pop-up but something else as well, uh, wherein in your regular uh, test case, in a regular flow, you don't expect that particular thing to see. So like when you click on this login, when you enter details, uh, uh or what else, so if something, as I said, something pops up, especially yeah, pop-ups is what we might get it. But in some other situations, wherein if you just keep try doing it, there you would get a proper scenario wherein we had to use recovery scenarios. So for now, I'll just show you. What I want you to understand here is uh, when to use, or how we generally use recovery scenarios, or what happens, what the flow is like. So I want only that particular part here. Yes, it is not, it might not be a real time scenario for a recovery scenario to be handled, but then yes, for understanding, I'll just take this as an example, wherein you just navigate to this, click on login, and expect something to happen. Or uh, let's say after clicking on login, we give valid details, uh, username, password, and the next step is to click on sign in. After sign in, we have log out, right? So you see, and then to keep the password. So what I will do in our flow is come navigate here and then enter this email password. Basically, I won't be clicking. Assume that after entering email, after entering password, by default, what our flow would say is we get a logged in screen. This is just an assumption. So we get a login screen. So, but then, okay, we get this kind of thing. So here, what we will do is the next step is to log out. We won't be clicking on the login button in the previous page, but then there our test case or the test step would get failed. When it is getting failed, uh, what we will do is our Tosca by default it searches for a recovery scenario in our test case. So first I'll explain it better with an example. Just log out here. Yeah. So we're on this page. Okay. I'll take sessions. First, I'll try to scan this page. So taken the username, password, and
Login also, right? Yeah.
login I will take. Yeah. So we'll navigate to this URL and then these three things. So I'm fine with the default ones for now. This one as well. Okay. So I'll just save this. And hereafter, we want to click on logout as well, right? So I will take after that screen as well. I'll just click the logout. Logout thing. I'm fine with this. Class icon. Those modules are fine. This is a home page or after login, I will call this as home page. Let's say logged in thing. So in the test case, this is normal folder, not anything to do with recovery, right? The normal folder, I'll just create a test case. Test case name I will give what
Login, login functionality.
No, functionality. And then our first step is to uh, open URL, right? So open URL I'll call, and then in open URL I'll just give the URL of this particular page. I'm not even clicking on login because I haven't scanned that. I'm not even clicking that. I'll just give it here, open URL, and in the open URL test configuration, just to make sure I use browser as Chrome. Okay. Now it launches this application, and then here is what we enter, username, password, email ID, and password. So I'll drag and drop onto my test case. Here I'll enter email ID, and password thing. I'll enter the password and login. I won't click. Then the next step is what? Let's say we have to log out. So to log out, there is another thing wherein we can say yes, wait on, wait on for this to appear, right? So exist or enable, whatever you say. So exist
I think
this.
for login also we can use that wait on, right? Because last time I thought we got some issue regarding.
Yes, yes. If it is having so a best practice is to use wait-ons, these things for every page change. So from this page to if you are navigating to some other page, just have some wait-on, a dynamic wait-on. So I will just for now. Sometimes I think this would work. If in case it doesn't, I'll just add it that way. But a
Sure,
good
sure.
practice is just to have wait-on for every page change, especially. Thanks.
Okay, Pradeep. Yeah.
So now if I have to log out again, what I have to do? I have to uh, copy the same steps again, repeat this. Here we are just wait for logout page to load or appear, something like that, right? We are waiting and then we are clicking on logout. Uh, uh, so to click logout, it would be input. No, this just a click. But then if you see now this two step, here we are having uh, we are using the same thing, but logout we are using like two different steps we have created, and one we are just waiting, another one we are just clicking. So in Tosca, what we have here is we have something called so for so this is specifically to this logout thing, as we are using the same element, but one after the other we are using a different operation. One is we are using wait on, another one we are using some input to click, and sometimes buffer, whatever it is. If we have that kind of thing in Tosca, instead of duplicating the step, what we can do is to the element itself, to this particular element. If you go to the properties, in the properties section we have something called cardinality. By default it is 0 to 1. So instead of this cardinality, if we use uh, cardinality as 0 to n or 0 to 2, which means 2 times, 0 to n means n times, n number of times, we can use this particular element in our same steps. Now, if you see here, logout, we have used exist equals to true. Again, after we have used, we have got an empty thing, which means again we can reuse this element in the same step. Again, after exist here, here itself I will say to click. After clicking, yes, if there is anything you want again to the logout, you can do. But then if you see the previous any other elements, see the email thing. Email we have used once. That's it. We haven't got anything else. But here itself, if, let's say we want to first click on the email and then enter, and the next step is to buffer for the email only. If we have those three things to do in one particular step, what we have to do is go to the email field and change the cardinality of your email from default 0 to 1 to 0 to n. As soon as you do 0 to n, you see, as soon as you use one thing, another option again we get it. If you want to do anything with, again in the same step, if you want anything to do with this field. So we had the same thing. So now here, instead of this, what I can do is I don't have to create another step. In the same step itself, I will just wait and I will also click. So I'll say wait to appear and click, something like that. So in one step itself, I'm just doing multiple operations. So this is what we have another steering, like in this cardinality properties, we can change it. We get those things. So now if you see here, I have entered username, email, password, and I'm just waiting for logout to appear and then click. Now if I execute this, what do you think? The test case would get pass or fail? Just open browser, email, password, and we are waiting for logout. So the test case would get failed because we haven't clicked on login, right? Let's say login also, if I just use now, in this case the test case might get passed, right? So in here, let's say I'm not using this particular field, so which means I want, so here I'm not nowhere using I'm clicking on login and then I'm just doing this part. So if I run, it would basically gets failed. So as it gets failed, what happens is something, whenever a test case gets failed, what the Tosca would do is it searches for any recovery scenarios mentioned by the user or not. So here by default there is nothing, and since there is no recovery scenario mentioned, what happens is the Tosca would get failed and give us a failure reason, and we would see it in the scratch. But then let's say how we can add a recovery scenario to a test case. So to add, just click on the test case, right click on it, and open the three dots. Here you have something called create recovery scenario collection, control N, control R. So just click on this, and then there you get this recovery scenarios. And inside this, again, we have uh, two things now. One is create this recovery scenario, which is this plus button of this. And another one is we have something called cleanup scenario. Now, what a recovery scenario and what a cleanup scenario is in recovery, if you just have to understand. First thing, as you know, when would a recovery scenario gets triggered? When something fails in your test case. Something gets failed in your test case. So it searches for a recovery scenario uh, is present in that particular location for that particular test case or not. So if that test case, we have this recovery scenario, then only this steps only gets triggered when something failed. And when something fails, what it does is by default it goes to this recovery scenario folder, wherein whatever steps you have mentioned or you would mention in this particular section is what it tries to do that. It tries to perform those steps. On based on that, it tries to recover. So here what I can say is,
Pradeep, for one step, there may be, there are several error handling things that we need to do. So
right,
in one recovery scenario, we can add more than one step, Pradeep,
yeah,
take different sort of things. Yeah.
yes, yes, you can. So here you can add uh, not only one step, but yeah, multiple steps. And then okay, I'll just use this module here itself. So this module, as you know, I'll just drag and drop. So one step I have added. Similarly, yes, if there are any other steps like we want before a recovery scenario gets triggered, we I want to take screenshot. So I can keep this screenshot thing first, and then I'll say okay, file name. I'll say this is failed step, something like that. Uh, So here, if you see, first thing what happens is, to the normal general test case, it opens the browser, it checks for email, it enters this email ID, password, and it waits for this particular thing. Since it doesn't appear because we haven't clicked on login, uh, this step gets failed. And since this step is getting failed, at this point of time, what it does is it checks if there is any recovery scenario mentioned anywhere in this hierarchy. So it says immediately we had in the test case itself, we have recovery scenario. So it goes here, and inside this, it checks for this particular recovery scenario folder. So if we have this, it goes inside this, and then it tries to perform all the steps, whatever you have did. So here you would say, okay, T-box, take screenshot. So it takes the screenshot with this name. And then next thing is it does this step. In this step, what we will do is we will click on the login button. And then as soon as all the steps are performed, what it does is from here, it again goes back to the step where it has failed, and then it tries to perform, it has to, like, now what our assumption would be, our assumption I'm saying, after entering this thing, when this step is getting failed, it triggers this recovery. After this recovery, it should go back to our step where it got failed, and again it should run from here. So it's not only this, but all the steps again from here, it should keep continuing our execution things. So this is what our assumption would be. Now, to make that particular flow work in that way, what we have to do is we have to do some settings. First of all, um, if you see the recovery scenario, this plus a recovery scenario thing in the properties section, you have something called retry level. Retry level in the sense, so at what level you want to retry this recovery. Here, what values we have? We have test case, we have test step, we have test step value. So this recovery thing, first of all, it is what an important interview question as well. So what is recovery scenario, and what is cleanup scenario? Uh, at what level we just retry it? So those things, you just have to give more explanation, your understanding of this. So recovery scenario, generally it gets triggered when a particular step gets failed. Something gets failed, then a recovery scenario gets triggered. And in recovery scenario, we have retry levels. We can uh, retry this recovery at 3 different levels. One is test case, which means whenever something gets failed, here we want to again redo our test case. We don't want to do or perform anything, or let's say we want to take screenshot, whatever we want to perform, we will do it. Once this is executed, we don't want to go back again from the same step. If we say test case, what it would do is it would redo from starting again, from starting a new fresh test case, same test case, next iteration, it starts from the beginning, and then it again does that. So if we give retry level as test case, so Here, if we set it to test step, then it just after recovering, after doing this successful step execution, it goes back to the step where it has failed, and then it continues from there. And if we use test step value, then in the test step, if we have 10 different values, at fifth value, if it gets failed, that from fifth step, it continues. It continues to uh, uh, let's say we have click exist click and we did something else, and in clicks something has failed, we had another step as well, right? So if we say test step value, then what it does is it in this step it again doesn't execute the first step that you have mentioned. It just recovers or continues from whichever step it has failed, and then the next steps whatever you have written, like click and then some buffer or what you have done. So that is what this retry level of test step value mean. Is it clear now
Yeah,
about
Pradeep, clear. Yeah.
retry level? So we have three different levels for the test case. So if you give test case, the whole test case would again execute from the start. If you give test step, only that step which was failed, it triggers executes from there, that point of time. And then if you give value from within that step, if there are 10 values, within fifth step if it gets failed, from that fifth step it continues. Those are the three different levels where we give. Now
Pradeep,
another
test step and test value. So step is like, so I'm not sure. Like, step means exactly. I'm not getting like.
okay, so if you see here, uh this is just for your understanding, I'll write it buffer. Okay, so now if you see here, let's say our test step came to this point and it has successfully executed this exist post true, and then the next step is log out click also it has done, assume log out click it has done, and then we are saying something buffer we are doing. So here it gets failed. Okay, so when it gets failed at this step, now if you see within step, how many steps we have four steps. Actually it's not just one step, it is
Yeah.
four steps. One, two, three, and then four. Fourth out of this four steps, which is what, not the step but the values. Again, these are just the test step values. So third one is getting failed. When this third one is getting failed, recovery scenario is triggered. In recovery scenario, whatever actions of things you said to do, it would do. After it has done this, based on what retry level has been given, you have given test step value. So what it does is it goes back to the step and then value. At the third point, it was failed. So now third thing it tries to do. From here, it continues. It tries to do this, and then when this is fine, it does this, and then so on. It goes to the next steps. Now, if you didn't give at that point of time, if you didn't give test step value and you gave test step, then since it failed in the third step and you wanted to do it from here, but what happens is based on the retry level, it doesn't do from here. It does this whole thing again. It again exists for true. It checks for that. It clicks on logout again, and then it
Yeah.
does this step. So if you want to repeat after recovering, you wanted to repeat all the steps again, then you need to give recovery retry level as test step. But
Okay.
in a general scenario, you shouldn't be doing that in that case.
Yeah.
If you have
Value is
multiple
enough, right, Pradeep? Matlab, for most of the things,
uh,
value would be enough, right?
test step values, yeah, yes. But then I haven't used much of test step value, but we use only sometimes whenever a step is getting failed, we create different steps only, right? So we create different steps, and then here we give retry level as test step mostly, and I will check for the same step, because in one step hardly one thing
One
I would be
scenario it will
performing,
break. Yeah.
not more multiple things I'll be doing, only one thing. So even if there are multiple things, I'll try to break down it to multiple steps and use it. So uh, yeah, and in this case we can give this retry level, or if you now give test case, then it does this, and after that again from open URL it does all these things, repeats again. Now how many times it should do is what the question can come. So retry level, once it gets failed, it comes here, it triggers this, and even after that, let's say in recovery, let's say we haven't clicked on login. We did some operation, but we don't know, okay, we had to click on login to make this thing work. So what it does is it comes here again, and then I'll just remove this unnecessary things now. So it execute this step. After that, this step gets failed, then goes to the recovery. It just takes the screenshot and then goes, once all the steps have been executed, it goes to the step again based on the retry level. So if you have said step, it comes here again, it tries to wait for logout, but again since we didn't recovered anything in the recovery scenario, it again gets failed. Once this again gets failed, it again goes back to the recovery and then does the take screenshot, again go back. So it keeps on doing this. But how many times is what the question is. So what happens is, go to the project settings, and then in T-box we have something called recovery. In recovery, so when do you want to, if you see here, by default, when you want to trigger the recovery things, so you want on dialog failure, on exception failure, on verification failure. So we have recover options on this three things. So value, if you see, execute next test case. So uh, first thing, by default it doesn't trigger this recovery scenario, because the settings says, okay, whenever there is a dialog failure or an exception, exception in the sense some element not found or this thing page print there, those kind of exceptions if we get. So when we get this kind of things, we want to trigger recovery, so we have to do that settings in our settings thing. So on dialog failure, yes, I want to execute recover. So click here. You see, we have something called, we don't want to continue with dialog failure and move on with the next steps. We don't want to execute the next test case. All the execution, it stops the execution. We don't want to stop whenever a dialog or some failure happens. We want to recover. So here we need to select recover. Same way, even exception occurs, I want to recover. When verification failure occurs, there you can choose whether to continue or go to the next step or recover. I'll just keep continue. For verification, I don't want to go to recovery scenario. But if you want, yes, you can again do it. And then next things are test case retry levels, I was saying, right? So here, if you see, test case retries, test step value retries. So by default, it is 1 to the test case, 2 to the test step, 3, which means when something gets failed, again test case would execute, right? So it would execute only once. Test case is retries, it executes once, and within this, again, if it gets failed, then it doesn't go to recovery again. Once it has gone, that's it. Second time it doesn't go. So if you want, even for the second time it has to go, then come change this value to 2. So 2 times it does. Similarly, 2, 3, whatever times you mention, it would do it that many number of times. I am fine with the default one. Now test step, again, it does 2 times. 2 times, it just tries to do the recovery thing, and test step value 3 times. So if you want change it, you come here, change uh, this particular number of retries thing. So this is where we try, and then this is how. If you don't give this thing, for sure, even if you have return recovery, it doesn't go, because in the failure reason you haven't mentioned you want to go to the recovery. So now I have changed that settings. Now what I would do is, if I now execute the test case, it should behave in this way, right? What we have. So if you execute now, it won't happen. Basically, it would fail again. Why this recovery scenario won't be triggered is, if you see here, executed email ID and password. Now it is actually looking for that logout button to appear. We haven't clicked it. Recovery scenario should have triggered, but it has failed. Uh, it is waiting for this, right? So it has failed. But if you see, we had also written recovery, but recovery didn't trigger. Why? Because recovery doesn't get triggered in the scratch book when you are executing. So you have to execute your test case, and if you want recovery to be triggered, then you have to execute it from the execution list. So within this execution list, you have to execute your test case. So I will create one execution list. Uh, Sample execution list something. And now here, if I execute this, then it should trigger. I'll just click this. You see, now it has entered both things. It is failing, like waiting for logout to appear, but here logout thing is not there. Now it should click on login button. So it is what? Uh, let's see if it clicks on login button or not. Okay. Actually, in recovery scenario as well, I have disabled that step. So okay, that's fine. Let's see. So it has failed again. If you see the reason, so if you see, this was failed, which was expected, and then a recovery scenario was triggered. And in recovery, we are just taking the screenshot. We are just taking the screenshot of our failed step. So here it was stopping, right? Here it has taken that screenshot, but then there is no other step in the recovery. So if you see, this has recovery, whatever steps you have mentioned, it has done. After doing that, it has again jumped back to the same step where which step it was failing. So that step, it again executed, and again it was failing, and again a recovery has been triggered, and again a screenshot was taken, and then it went to the same step again, and now this time it is getting failed, which means now after this it has not gone to the recovery scenario, because uh, it has already retried recovery scenario 2 times.
Two
You see,
times. Yeah.
in the settings we mentioned to try it for 2 times. If you want change, go there, change to whatever number of times, and that many number of times it keeps on trying.
Okay.
So sometimes the page loads. If you just want to keep trying it, doing it for 10 times, and within that 10 times we assume, okay, for the 7th or 8th time it might come, then do it that way, like that. uh, so now even recovery scenario, it is what failing here, not doing anything. And one more thing what I wanted to do here is, in cleanup scenario, what I will do is, I'll just close the browser. I'll just close the browser with this. Now same scenario, let me rerun again, let it fail. So if I run now, It is launching, entering email, entering password, and now the test case gets failed. When it is getting failed, it is looking for recovery. In recovery, we have mentioned take the screenshot and nothing else. So it performs that action and then go back to the failed step because we have given retry as test step. So it goes to the step again. It does that. If it is getting failed, again recovery triggers based on retry. And now see, if you see, the browser has been closed because what happened is, so if you see here, wait, recovery, and then this recovery, and even this one, it is getting failed. And after this is getting failed, a cleanup scenario is triggered. So what happens is, when maximum number of retries, whatever is performed, whatever you have asked to do, if it has done, uh, if all these things have been done, and even then the test case is not getting going well, then a cleanup scenario would be triggered. And in cleanup scenario, whatever, it's not like only you have to do this, but whatever you would mention, it tries to do that one, that particular thing only once. So cleanup scenario gets triggered only when recovery scenario number of retries are done, or if something fails in the recovery scenario. Let's say we want to here we are clicking here, we if we are doing any other steps, if we have 10 steps, out of that 10 steps, it can happen at some point of time wherein even the recovery scenario gets failed, right? It can get failed depending on if the application itself is not loaded, let's say, or the application is uh, not giving us the logged in screen, it is giving something else, or some element has been changed. Because of that, if it is getting failed, even this recovery scenario gets failed. Even when this recovery scenario gets failed, a cleanup scenario gets triggered at that point of time, and it does whatever you have mentioned in this. So is it clear about cleanup scenario and recovery scenario?
Yes, Pradeep. Yeah.
Right. So uh, so in here, what I have is this is why here the cleanup scenario got triggered even if multiple retries were done on recovery, and even then it is getting failed. That's why it triggered cleanup scenario. Now let's go back and enable this particular step so that we are recovering and then we want the next things to happen. So here, go to the test case again, and now you execute. So this time we are expecting it should pass. Has opened this, entered email ID password. Now in recovery, it goes recovery, takes screenshot, and then click on login is what we said. So it should click on login now. See, it is clicking on login, and now okay, logout thing pop-up is appearing. That's why this logout just another, and then this logout thing. If you see, now the step got passed. You see, open URL, and then we had given these two things. It it was getting failed, and in recovery scenario, we had taken screenshot, and then we clicked on login, and then after recovery, it went to the step which was failed, and at that point of time, the step was passing. It was waiting for this. It was waiting for this logout thing, and then it clicked on logout. So this is how it generally goes this way. So this is about recovery scenario and then the cleanup scenario on this part.
Okay, Pradeep.
Any doubts in this, Nawaz?
No, Pradeep, it's clear.
Yeah. You do you have any doubts?
No, Pradeep, no. Hello. Hello, Pradeep, are you able to hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, I said no doubts. I was saying, but I don't know any
Okay.
net. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So this is what we have. So key points I would want you to uh, just check this uh, thing. So recovery scenarios. When does a recovery get triggered, and what is this recovery scenario, cleanup scenario, and then what are the levels, retry levels we had gone through, and the settings again. If you don't mention this Sunday settings like when to recover and all, so it won't even trigger. So you can just try from your side, from your end, checking this multiple things. So you can, if you don't give this one, and if, even if you have recovery scenario and if you are executing it from execution list, even then it doesn't trigger. So all these possible things you can just try and explore, and you would have bit more understanding of all these things. So this is
Okay.
about a recovery. So now recovery here, where all at what places we can write. We have written here within our test case. Now instead of this, we can do this in the folder level itself as well. So I'll just cut it. I don't want that. I want it here. Or so in the test case, if there are multiple test case again, let's say some test case. So now even these two test cases, I wanted the same recovery. If it is a different recovery scenario, yes, within this, again, we have to create a different recovery scenario. But then if both the test cases has the same recovery scenario and the cleanup scenario, if this whole thing is same, then what we have to do is you shouldn't be doing it in each and every test case. Instead of that, uh, to the immediate folder level is what you can create. On the folder, right click and then create a recovery scenario, and create the recovery scenario and the cleanup scenario in this thing at this level. So here if you do, and if you don't do in the test cases, then that is also fine. Like when the test case is getting failed, it checks for this recovery scenario. It comes here and then it executes this one, and then based on retry whatever you have done, it goes back to the same thing. So even then this is what the recovery goes. And if not this, you can also do it in this folder level. So to each and every folder or the test case, you can create a recovery scenario. Same way, even here you can create recovery scenario. So to each and every folder, uh, so in folder, once you have created recovery scenario, you cannot create another recovery scenario. And now let's say here you have multiple recovery scenarios, right? You have within test case, you have within folder, immediate folder, and then this folder, and then this folder. So yes, in all the places also we can have it. Now if we have this many recovery scenarios, to which recovery does it go, is what our question would be. Then even the interviewer can ask this thing. So what happens is, so whenever a test step has failed, it checks for the immediate and the previous recovery scenario. So immediate and the previous. So for this test case, what is the immediate and previous? So if you see the recovery scenario is within test case, so this recovery scenario gets triggered. If this is not there, and if this folder, these things are there, then immediate is under this folder, this one is there, right? So this one would get triggered first, and then even if this doesn't go well, then it goes to the this recovery scenario, then it goes to the next above. So just immediate uh, previous recovery scenario, whatever is there, it triggers that. So this is the flow of what it goes. Is it clear on this part?
Yeah, Pradeep.
What I'm
Yeah.
trying to, yeah, yeah, correct. So this is about, I would say, recovery scenarios, and then it executes here in the execution list. And so those settings as well, if you see retry level, and we have something, those settings, what we were doing there, we can even do it in the from the execution list itself as well. So retries are there, right? So test case retries. You have dialog failure, exception failure, the setting names. If you just remember, let me see. What is the setting name on dialog failure? Okay, on dialog failure, on exception failure, we want recover. So here, you just say on dialog failure. You see, on dialog failure, and then you can create on exception failure, and then we have test case retries as well, right? Test case retries, or the test step retries, so test step value as well, right? So even those settings, test step value retries, you see, all those things we can just, we don't have to go change in the settings here itself. We can say on dialog failure I want to recover, on exception failure I want to recover, and then test case retries I want to do it 3 times. Step I want to do it 5 times. Value I want to do it 2 times. Anything. Just set it in the execution list, and then when you are running, so it takes only this configurations. It doesn't see what you have written in, what you have done in the project Tosca settings thing. It just checks this one,
Okay, so
and then
just
based
when
on,
configuration is given, the project will not be considered, right, Pradeep?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
which means basically we are overriding that project configurations with our test configurations.
Okay, got it. But we can do the same over there also, right, Pradeep? In the project also, you can give the same.
Yes, same thing you can give it. When you gave there, you don't have to do it here, and then you can run. But
Yeah.
then if someone else is not aware of, or if they haven't done that settings, and they are executing our test case, then they won't get the desired result, right? Expected result won't come
Okay, got
because they had to change, do that settings. So you have to specifically say them do these things, or if you just do it here, they don't even have to worry about what settings they have to do, where they have to do, what value they have to give, and all.
it. Okay.
So this is about this particular part, uh, about the recovery scenario, and then yeah, most of the things I've covered. The only thing is what you can do, you would just try explore doing more those things, and then when you are working, uh, picking some scenarios, when you are doing it at that moment, you would only get the scenario where actually you have to use recovery, because only thing, if you just understand the flow, when which one would get triggered, what is the flow of this execution, if you are clear with this part, then that's it. When to use is what, based on the application behavior and your understanding and analyzing on that part, you would uh, one would be able to do this, so they don't have to worry about on that part. So this is about recovery, and yeah, I guess I'm done for today's session from my side. Any questions?
No, Pradeep, nothing from my side.
Nothing? Then yeah, we are good to close today's session. Thank you, Nawaz.
Okay, Pradeep.